Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Gene Code by Jonathan Yañez, narrated by Rachel Leblang. 1. Alan. He came with the lightning, and heaven came with him. The thunder was loud enough to make even him wince. Cracks of lightning descended around him, ushering his arrival. For all the fanfare the sky made, he understood he would not be well received, and perhaps for good reason. He had left them, and while he understood it was for the best, he also realized not everyone would see things his way. More specifically, the leader of the elite nation, Connor Moore, would rather rip out his throat than work together again. It was his job to convince him otherwise. Alan Price was a Nephilim, a human chosen by angelic forces and gifted with abilities to be their weapon on Earth. Alan's destiny hadn't stopped there. He had also been chosen as the Horseman of War during the Battle of the Apocalypse. In a way, he was only doing that again, fulfilling his duty one last time to become what the world so desperately needed and fend off the end one more time. Cold rain splattered around him, soaking his hair and clothing. Steam wafted off the top of his long, wet blonde hair. He had debated arriving outside the gates, but then realized Connor probably wouldn't have let him in. He had let himself in, choosing to land on the balcony outside the leader of the elite nation's room. Alan stood now on the stone balcony with his fist hovering over the glass doors leading into the room. Before his fist could descend, the door opened, and Connor Moore stood there staring at the Nephilim face to face. "I could smell you as soon as you landed," Connor growled, his eyes flashing a dangerous red as his elite gene was activated. "You're either incredibly stupid or much too sure of yourself to come back here. Leave, before I make you leave." Alan had anticipated his warm welcome, and actually it was going better than he'd planned. He half thought Connor would go for his throat when the two men met again. "I'm not here to fight," Alan said, lifting both hands, palms toward Connor in sign of surrender. "I've come back to help." "You've come back to help?" Connor said, repeating Alan's words. "You've come back to help. We could have used your help when the world fell apart. Where were you then? Where were you when families were bleeding and dying? Where were you when we were on the run? Where were you when—" Connor stopped himself, shaking his head in frustration. "You know what? It doesn't even matter. You left, and we've managed to survive without you. We're fine. Leave us alone. We don't need your help." "You will," Alan responded. "You've done better than I could have dreamt, but there's something coming now that even you won't survive. We're in the end game. I had to go to make sure we had the support we needed around the world to make a concentrated push against the Dread. We can't beat them alone. But we're not alone. The Dread wants us to think there is no one left, but there are more allies out there than you know. That's where I've been." Alan stopped, the rain still splashing around him. Without an invitation to come in, he had been left out in the cold. For a moment, he thought Connor might actually rethink his stance on the matter. He was wrong. "Get off my balcony, or I'll make you get off my balcony," Connor said under his breath. "Go do what you do best and disappear for the next few years." "Connor, you're not—" That was as far as Alan got with his argument, as a straight-palmed strike to his chest sent him reeling back into the railing. Alan slipped on the wet stones and went down to a knee. The elites were a group of humans who possessed an extra DNA strand that most people did not. It made them stronger, faster, heal quicker, and heightened senses. Alan knew all of this. What he had miscalculated was their strength. It wasn't the hardest he had ever been hit, but still enough to remind him he needed to avoid such damage if he could. Alan sucked in air and rose to his feet, reining in his temper.
You don't want to do this, Alan said, rolling his shoulders. It doesn't have to be this way.
Oh, I think it does, Connor answered as he gave in to the elite animalistic urge raging inside of him and tapped into his elite gene. His eyes went crimson red, his fangs elongated, and he rushed forward. Alan ran to meet him. Somewhere in the back of his head, he hoped there was a way beyond this to still remain allies. But right now, Connor was lost to that animal living inside of him. And maybe for good reason. Alan had left them. No matter the reason, he had left. Both Nephilim and Elite clashed on the balcony, the bloated gray clouds and rainwater the only witnesses to the conflict at hand. Connor was fast and strong, but Alan was quicker now that he knew he was in a fight, and the only way of getting out of it was working through to the end. Connor pressed the attack, aiming for Alan's head and stomach. The leader of the elite nation was a skilled warrior, putting together combinations that utilized his knees and even a spinning back fist. Alan gave ground, blocking the strikes and knees meant for his face and torso. Connor landed one that rang his bell and pissed him off a little as a line of blood pushed itself out of Alan's mouth like a dam bursting. Hurting Connor was one thing Alan didn't want to do, but neither was he going to stand there and act as a human punching bag. Alan reared up with his right leg and sent out a kick to Connor's chest that sent the elite human flying back into the balcony's stone railing. Stone cracked and gave way as Connor hit the protective barrier with enough force to break bone. The sky boomed and rumbled overhead. Shouts from those below began to ascend to the balcony now as guards and other elites witnessed the falling rocks below. Alan was going to have to end this soon, or else it wasn't just Connor he was going to be fighting. It would be the entire elite nation.
Stop,
Alan said as Connor lifted himself off the ground and charged again. Connor had no such plans to stop or hold back. The two men traded blows. Connor landed a punch that rang Alan's bell enough for the elite to grab him and slam him into the ground. Alan rolled out of the way and regained his feet before Connor could land on him to deal more damage. Alan moved in as the aggressor now, blocking a blow meant for his head and dealing a wicked right hook that sent Connor reeling to the stone ground. Connor's face softened the landing against the uneven rock, scraping the right side of his face and leaving rock embedded in his skin. Connor didn't take more than a second before he was back on his feet, spitting blood to the side. His face was raw and showed angry flush under his skin, but was already beginning to heal in front of Alan's eyes.
Stop,
Lauren said, rushing onto the balcony and backed up by a dozen or more elite warriors. She placed herself between the two and raised her arms. I can't believe you two. You're acting like children. Just stop. Connor moved in despite his wife's appearance, as if he were going to attack again.
Connor?
Lauren asked, pressing a hand to her husband's chest firmly.
Really?
Connor was breathing hard, but Alan could tell right now he wasn't himself. He had let too much of his anger boil over. The elite gene was in control of him now. It was only because of his wife's voice and touch that any semblance of man was seen now. With his chest heaving, Connor finally took a deep breath, his eyes reverting from blood red to their normal brown. His canines receded at the same time.
Thank you, Lauren,
Alan began.
I didn't mean...
You don't get to talk either, Lauren told Alan like some kind of teacher who had found two boys fighting in the schoolyard and now was doling out her justice. You left us.
I had to,
Alan sputtered under Lauren's fierce gaze.
Do you know why I was gone?
I'll be asking the questions. Lauren cut him off again with a voice like the crack of a whip. Even the thunder had packed up and decided to move on as if it too were frightened of Lauren Abelardus's justice. Everyone inside. I haven't even had my coffee this morning, and here I am soaked playing referee to two grown men who may be this world's last hope. Without hesitation, the group obeyed, Lauren leading them inside the spacious chamber. Alan allowed the others to go first and brought up the rear. The room was large, with a massive bed on the left and a fireplace against the right wall next to the door. Another door on the far wall led to an open bathroom. Even with this many people in the room, there was enough room to move about comfortably. Alan had to remind himself he was in a castle, and this was what kind of money and power the leader of the elite nation had once wielded. It must have been difficult for not only Connor but the entire species of elite as a whole to witness their once thriving and influential hold on the world deteriorate. Lauren whispered a few words with one of the guards, who looked at her as if she had lost her ever-loving mind, but obeyed, ushering the rest of the warriors from the room. They all gave Alan dirty looks before they left. One of them even ran a finger across his throat and pointed at Alan. "There are towels in the restroom, and I'm having coffee brought up," Lauren explained, moving to the bathroom as she spoke. "Now, like it or not, we are all we have. It's not easy for me either, but we have to figure this out, and no one is leaving this room until we do. Am I understood?" Connor and Alan just looked at one another. "Am I understood?" Lauren shouted from the bathroom where she emerged with 2 fluffy towels. "Yes," Connor and Alan said in unison. "All right, then." Lauren nodded with approval, handing out the towels to the men. "Alan, where have you been all this time?" Alan worked the towel through his blonde hair, repeating the story he had prepared for this moment for a long time. He realized his re-entry to the world would come with a mixed bag of emotions. Distrust from the elites and praise from the Guardian academies he had set up before he left. "This isn't the only place on Earth where the Dread infected humanity," Alan explained. "The Dread are everywhere, on every continent, country, state, city. I needed to go to help them and organize the resistance, but more importantly, a counterattack to end all of this." "And did you find something?" Connor asked, breaking his silence. "No, we can't beat the Dread in a fight," Alan admitted simply. "There are too many of them. But maybe we can cure them." 2. Lauren. She really needed coffee if she was going to put up with these shenanigans so early in the morning. The simple truth was she felt both sides. Like her husband, she felt the betrayal brought on by Alan's disappearance after he had convinced them to relocate their home and consolidate their assets for the fight to come. Alan hadn't been there to witness the killing and the dying like they had. However, she suspected he had seen plenty of carnage on his own. Was it fair that he asked so much of them and then seemingly abandoned them? No. But who said anything in this life was going to be fair? "What cure?" Lauren asked as Alan threw a curveball at the husband and wife power couple. "What are you talking about?" "The Dread mindless are too numerous to try and fight, but we can offer them some reprieve from their hell by curing them," Alan continued as he draped the towel over his shoulders and stood by the fire. "The cure will put them to rest, and then we'll only have to deal with the Dread lieutenants and the human mercenaries who have served them." "I like the sound of that, but nothing comes without a cost here," Connor said, narrowing his eyes at the Nephilim. "What aren't you telling us?" "It's not going to be easy," Alan said, extending his hands to warm over the fire. "The creation of the elixir, the distribution to the mindless Dread. The Dread have pulled back the bulk of their forces to hide in the oceans. They want the rest of humanity to fall into a false sense of hope that the mindless Dread are all but gone. They aren't. They're just waiting until they are called upon once again." There was a brief pause as a knock on the door interrupted the unlikely trio of allies. Lauren moved to open it and accept the tray of coffee and cups. Just the aroma of the heavenly brew made her smile. Now, more than ever, it was the simple things in life they needed to take joy in to keep them going. She re-entered the room and poured herself a cup, motioning for the men to do the same. Connor and Alan eyed each other warily, but both men followed suit. Alan paused here again, taking the time to prepare his own coffee, adding in generous amounts of sugar and cream. "You want any coffee with your cream and sugar?" Connor asked, settling for a brief splash of creamer in his. "Is there even any coffee in there?" "Don't judge me," Alan said, taking a step back to drink his own cup of joe. "I'm sorry about your face, by the way." Connor's face, although having taken the damage doled out by the Nephilim, was completely new now thanks to his accelerated healing. "Don't be sorry. I've been hit harder, by small children and the elderly," Connor added. Lauren held her breath to see if the slight would spark another physical interaction, or if the men had decided to put aside their differences for the moment and bury the past. "Next time, maybe your wife won't be here to save you," Alan said good-naturedly. "I'll take a rematch once this is all behind us." "Name the date and place," Connor said, narrowing his eyes. "All right, glad to see we're all getting along now," Lauren said, blowing on her coffee. She wanted to move the conversation along and focus the men on the task instead of each other. Their alliance was fragile at best. "Alan, this elixir. How is it made? How do we get it to the mindless dread?" "The elixir can be made from the blood of an elite and the gene code embedded in another," Alan explained, staring into his mug of mostly sugar and cream thoughtfully. "Distributing it to the mindless will be harder. We'll need to get them to play their hand and pull out their forces from the water. I have teams around the globe ready to act once that happens. The elixir can be weaponized to be airborne." "Wait, let me get this straight," Connor said with a raised eyebrow he had adopted from his wife. "You want us to piss off the Dread so bad they are forced to send in their cavalry to annihilate us, and that's after we make enough of this magic elixir and spread it across the globe to freedom fighters?" "That's about right," Alan said with a shrug. "More or less, at least. There are a few more details, but yeah, I think you got it." Connor looked over to his wife for her thoughts. Lauren loved him for that. They ruled together. Decisions were made as one in a united front. It was rare to find that trait in many rulers, especially now. "What other option do we have?" Lauren asked Connor in front of Alan. She didn't really care if he heard her or not. "The hour is late, and hope is not lost, but it's on its last breath." Connor nodded slowly, taking in his wife's words. "Alan, do you have any idea on how to provoke the Dread into playing their hand and sending out the mindless against us?" Lauren asked the Nephilim. "Wouldn't they sense the trap?" "Maybe, but like you said, what other option do we have?" Alan asked, placing his coffee cup down on the tray. He folded his arms over his chest. "If we can convince the Dread that they're on the verge of victory, and if they just commit their resources to a final push, they'll annihilate the last of the resistance. It will be enough. We consolidate our last fighters here. Let the Dread think that with this last stronghold defeated, it's game over for humanity. And then, when they descend on us, we make our move." "And if they don't?" Lauren asked, playing devil's advocate. "What if they hold their mindless back? We may need a prize that will sweeten the pot for them." "I think I may have an idea on that as well, but you're not going to like it," Alan said with a long, drawn-out sigh. "I know, because I don't like it either." Lauren stopped sipping her coffee for a moment. She took the time to study the Nephilim. Not just look at him, but really study him. Alan looked as though he had aged 10 years in the time since they last saw him. His shoulders were hunched as if he carried the weight of the world there. Bags hung under his bloodshot eyes. This was not the same hopeful young Nephilim she had met so many years before. A part of her felt sorry for him. She understood he was doing everything in his power to hold on to hope. If they had a chance, then it was together. Perhaps she would have made some changes in the way he proceeded with his plan, but not the ultimate end. In the end, they wanted the same thing. There was no doubt about that. "Go on," Connor pressed. "The scientist who created this gateway to unlock mankind's inner evil embedded a genetic code in his daughter. It's with her blood, using elite blood as a catalyst, that we will create the elixir of life." Alan shook his head, now looking into the fire. "I would never give her up. However, if the Dread knew she was the key to their undoing, then there is no doubt in my mind they would send their best to deal with her." "By deal with her, you mean kill her," Connor stated, looking over to his wife to make sure she had caught the meaning in his words. "Is that what we've become now?" "No, never," Alan said, removing his eyes from the dancing flames back to the husband and wife team. "We would never give her up. We can never give her up, or what better are we than them? What I suggest as a last means of drawing them in is letting them know she is the key." "Using her as bait. Just say it." Lauren spoke for both men. "As a last course of action, we would use her as bait." "Only until the mindless dread were unleashed, and we could then counter with the elixir of life," Alan added to make it sound better in their minds. "I know where she is now. She's been taken in by one of my guardians and being taught the ways of the light." "And you think she's going to just go along with this plan?" Lauren asked, debating the other way things could go. What if the girl was unwilling to help? Were they ready to take her blood from her? "I think she'll help," Alan said, looking over to Connor. "You've actually spoken with the leader of her party over the radio, Taylor Hart." Lauren recognized the name. They had received radio transmission from an outpost Lou had connected with in Olympia, Washington. Lou had vouched for the woman and her people. She was gifted in a way unlike she or Alan was. She was something different. "Nothing happens by chance or without a plan behind it," Alan said, scratching at the underside of his jaw. "It's not a coincidence you were contacted now. Things are playing out as they always should." "Then we need to get them here," Lauren said to both men, looking for consensus. "If Taylor has this girl with her, then we need to get them here before Liberty, Echo, and the Dread Army arrive." "Agreed," Connor said, looking over to Alan. "You still have those pretty blue wings of yours?" "You think my wings are pretty?" Alan asked with a twitch of his lips. It was the first time Lauren had seen him grin. It wasn't a full smile, but she would take what she could get at the moment. "What about this state of freedom?" Lauren found herself thinking about the next closest outpost to them with humans holding out against the Dread. They refuse to partner with us, but maybe with this plan in place, they'll change their minds. "It's too late for them now," Alan said, looking down to the ground. "Liberty Echo and his Dread Army are already there." "It's one of the first times I'm not going to enjoy saying I told you so," Lauren thought out loud, remembering their visit to the compound days before. They had been met with hostility and distrust and eventually turned away, but that didn't mean Lauren wanted to see them all dead. "I have one of our messengers going to Taylor Hart and her encampment," Alan said, changing the topic of conversation. "She's appeared to Taylor in dreams until now. She'll coordinate with her on their end and bring her people here." "This messenger?" Connor asked, trying to hide the distrust from his voice and failing. "You trust her?" "With my life," Alan answered. "She'll pull through." 3. Taylor. Things were happening too fast for her to track. First, she was able to actually reach someone over that cockamamie radio Frank and Lou managed to build, and now the woman who had appeared to her in her dreams stood in front of her. She was nothing like Taylor imagined. Taylor stood at the top of their city gates under a cool morning sun. She looked down past the sheet metals they used for walls at the lone traveler in the white cloak below. She looked familiar enough. a tall woman in a deep-set cloak with an easy smile and strong features. She wasn't as old as Taylor would have imagined her, or as, well, magical. If this woman had the power to enter her dreams, then why was she knocking on the front door now? Why was she here at all? Taylor wasn't exactly in the business of taking people for their words now more than ever. "Want me to kill her?" Samantha asked from Taylor's right as the sniper sighted in on the traveler. "I mean, just to be sure, if she is the magical messenger, then is a bullet really going to stop her? Can never be too careful these days." "I heard that," the woman below, calling herself the messenger, stated. "I wasn't trying to whisper," Samantha shouted back. Along with Taylor and Samantha, there were 4 other guards on the wall with more and more people from their community coming to see what the hubbub was all about. "Trouble?" Talon asked, climbing up the rungs of the ladder to the walkway on the interior of the wall. "What is it?" "We don't know for sure," Taylor answered honestly. It didn't feel right to call whoever this woman was trouble. Equally as strong was the pull not to trust that someone who had come to her in her dreams was outside of their gate asking to be let inside. Talon swept back his cloak's hood, which mirrored that of the one the messenger wore. The muscular man's face broke out from one of concern to pure joy, almost relief. "It's her," Talon said, relaxing the grip he held on the axe and knife at his belt. "It's her. It's time." "Don't know what the crazy Jedi over here is talking about," Samantha said, finally realizing she wasn't going to be allowed to shoot anyone and lowering her scope with regret. "Care to share with the rest of the class, Obi-Wan?" "The messenger," Talon said, looking to Samantha, then Taylor when Samantha failed to seem impressed. "Taylor, you said she came to you in your dreams as well. You know who this is. She's one of us." Taylor weighed her options, looking over the wall to the unassuming woman beyond and then to her right inside the safety of the town walls. She hated herself for doing this, but like a magnet, her eyes were pulled over to the impromptu graveyard constructed by the town inhabitants. The most recent addition to the cemetery was a plot for Captain Martin. He had been a friend and a mentor. Taylor had watched as he was ripped to pieces by a monster born of the dread. What if this was another trick? What if the dread was behind this stranger poised as someone from her dreams? She couldn't let the town down. She couldn't let anyone else down again. "Taylor? Taylor, can you hear me?" Frank asked. Frank and Melissa, tasked with leading the town, had also joined the growing throng at the gate. The young man looked at her with concern. Yeah, I'm here," Taylor said, motioning with her chin to the other side of the wall. "We have a visitor. I'll go out alone and see if she is who she says she is. Samantha, if anything happens, shoot." "Don't have to tell me twice," Samantha said, brushing her hair into place over her right eye that had been infected with some kind of stone disease. Not just her eye, part of her face had also fallen victim to the disease. The woman sighted down her scope with her good eye, finger off trigger. For the moment. "I'm going with you," Talon said as Taylor made for the ladder down to the ground. "She's one of us, Taylor. You don't have anything to fear. She has come to me in my dreams as well." "Good, so there's nothing to fear and everyone should be willing to play nice," Taylor answered, dropping the last few rungs to the hard floor below. Her legs absorbed the blow easily, enhanced by her strength. "So, let's just go talk." Taylor motioned for the pair of guards at the entrance to open the door-sized length of steel that had been cut into the much larger gate. She was surprised to see that one of these men was Marshall. Marshall Montgomery was a new addition to their town, along with Samantha. The carefree man was a bit off his rocker, but that was what happened when one was immortal. Every time Marshall died and came back, a little less of who he was made the return trip. "Need a hand?" Marshall inquired. "I'd probably be the safest bet to go out there. I can't really die and all, so if things do get bad, I'm an easy human shield.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?